Various forms of COVID passports are being introduced across Europe, and we are seeing protests all over Europe's major cities. Where do you stand on COVID passports? Do you think vaccines should be made mandatory? Do you think it should be sufficient to show proof that you've recently had a negative test or recently recovered from the virus? Or do you think the government should stay out of your private business? And will they use these passports as a way to create the dystopia we've always feared was on the horizon?
Thousands of demonstrators came out on Saturday in Paris to protest against stricter anti-COVID measures. When the scuffles turned violent, the police used tear gas to disperse the crowd.
We don't want people coughing and choking. Have some fucking tear gas! Right, why are you not wearing a mask?
But that public anger didn't deter French legislators.
Le projet de loi est adopté.
They passed a law last night that will make vaccines mandatory for health workers and vaccine passports essential to get into museums, cinemas and festivals.
The coronavirus pandemic has created unprecedented political tensions and has built further upon divisions that were already present in culture. In America, of course, the kind of Trump-Biden divisions, the left-right divisions. In the country I'm from, the UK, the Brexit divisions have once again played out through the sort of liberal versus conservative or libertarian versus progressive kind of arguments that are springing up around masks and vaccines. Wherever you stand on this issue, it seems that unprecedented legislation is being introduced, and this is something that we should certainly be mindful of. Even if you're a person who thinks, absolutely, we must have vaccines, the coronavirus has created a unique situation and we need to respond to it uniquely. The erosion of civil liberties is always something that should be viewed in a circumspect, judicious and cautious manner. Interestingly, in the UK, church leaders have come together to oppose these measures, or at least speak out against them. Hundreds of UK church leaders have told the Prime Minister, he's called Boris Johnson, he's that man. Do you remember when he had coronavirus and he was like a little baby bird, remembering his nurses' names? That guy's gone. They've told the Prime Minister that plans to use vaccine passports for entry into venues is one of the most dangerous policy proposals ever to be made in the history of British politics, with the potential to bring about the end of liberal democracy as we know it. That's a pretty heavy statement, and from a surprising source, isn't it? You know, when I think of the Church of England and church leaders, these days the church is a somewhat nullified force in this country. Maybe in America you have kind of forms of evangelicism, and there are other religious disciplines, of course, that are much more mobilized and intense when it comes to activism. But we've come to think of the UK church as somewhat castrated. So I'm interested in seeing how this plays out. Imposing mandatory and ubiquitous legislation across large populations is going to cause, if not clear-cut, blatant problems, certainly with regard to democracy and free will. Certainly it's going to cause some confusion and conflict, such as we are seeing in Paris. I mean, them guys, the French, not to disrespect them, I love the French, like, they don't like being told what to do. History tells us they're up for a revolution. They have a revolution, then they have a revolution about that revolution, and then a revolution about the revolution that the revolution brought up.
Now, here in Britain, there are no vaccine passports yet. But Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned they're coming in September for, among other crowded places, nightclubs. And already the nightclub owners are not happy. They're pushing back. They say, we've been hammered by this pandemic. This is just going to make everything worse.
I feel concerned about the degree of government involvement in my life. I mean, don't you feel, generally speaking, that you want to like just sort of live your own life? Well, it's not possible. That's not possible. There's a thing called society. Yeah, there is. And then if you want to follow that line, there's a thing called society. Think about how that plays out economically and socially in other areas. For example, if there is a thing called society that we're all participating in, well, why would you have various forms of ghettoization, primarily economic ghettoization, where there are some members of society or some social groups that are completely excluded from social contracts enjoyed elsewhere? It's very interesting how this particular issue is being treated with a very specific and, one might argue, totalitarian mindset, where elsewhere our cultures are built on principles of individualism. Like, well, you're an individual, you're responsible for your own life, you're responsible if you're in prison or if you can't make a go of life yourself, that's your fault, that's your responsibility. So it's being regarded uniquely. And I suppose to someone like me that's skeptical and sometimes downright cynical about government, the agenda of governments, the relationships of government with big business, something like this makes me concerned about the direction we're heading in. And not just me. One of the things that they brought up in this letter from the church was this: COVID status certificates would be divisive, discriminatory and destructive, it adds. We risk creating a two-tier society, a medical apartheid in which an underclass of people who decline vaccination are excluded from significant areas of public life. There is also a legitimate fear that this scheme would be the thin end of the wedge. The thin end of the wedge meaning that ultimately more and more things will be mandated. Now, you remember, you've seen the Black Mirror episodes, you're aware of what's going on in real time in China, where we're all issued social scores on the basis of data that's accumulated through social media and elsewhere on our phone, where you might not be permitted to. This is already happening in China, you know this already, right? That you can't get a train if you've got a low social score. This, in a way, seems like a means for leveraging further invasion into your personal life from public authority. You remember, of course, after the tragic events of 9/11, how anti-terror legislation meant that spying became the norm. We're still trying to unpick and understand the amount of invasive practice that was inaugurated as a result of that event. Well, similarly, whatever your views on the pandemic, where it came from, how it came to be here, what the impact of it is on a sort of individual, social and cultural level, the fact is that now the response to it does align with some people's opinions about government agenda, i.e. further control, further invasion, further regulation of your life. The very idea that you might not be able to attend a public event without showing a passport, that concerns me. Other people might say, well, we've all got national insurance numbers and stuff like that. I don't know, man. Like the other day I was on the River Wye and I saw dead fish in that river. Like, you know, and like when you see things that feel like an indication of something foreboding, it's, I think, foolish not to respond to it. The way I saw that fish in the river made me feel like, oh wow, man, there's shit going on with, like, you know, pollution and water levels and climate. And this kind of legislation makes me feel like, can you not sort of see the stuff that sci-fi has been preparing us for slowly being edged into place?
All across Europe there have been demonstrations. In Athens, where the Greek government has said health workers have no choice but to get fully vaccinated. And in Italy, where a peaceful crowd marched against the vaccine passports they'll soon need for places like gyms and museums and for indoor dining.
Don't you think that, I mean, get this, it is a democracy. If there's hundreds of thousands of people protesting everywhere in Europe, well, then in a democracy you've got to listen to them. In a democracy, if you claim this is a democracy we live in, then you've got to respect the rights of people to have whatever opinion they want. In fact, a democracy is meaningless if the only opinions you respect are the opinions of people that agree with you. That's not a democracy, that's an authoritarian dictatorship. And if this many people are protesting on this scale and their voices are not heard, then you know for sure one thing: you do not live in a democracy. If you can't express your opinion safely through protest, through democratic means, through, for example, a kind of an election, or through, or on whatever scale, if people don't have the right to have personal autonomy over their bodies, over their health, then I suppose then I would have to pay serious attention to what these church leaders said. The introduction of vaccine passports would constitute an unethical form of coercion and violation of the principle of informed consent. For some Christians, they may be unable, or, you know, let's take that beyond Christians, there could be lots of people unable and unwilling to be vaccinated against COVID because of serious issues of conscience related to the ethics of vaccine manufacture or testing. This scheme has the potential to bring about the end of liberal democracy as we know it, to create a surveillance state in which the government uses technology to control certain aspects of citizens' lives. As such, this constitutes one of the most dangerous policy proposals ever to be made in the history of British politics. This is the aspect we should focus on. You can do your own research into the impact of coronavirus, and I would suggest that you look beyond the mainstream media into the impact of vaccines and the efficacy of vaccines and make your own decisions. I have no opinion. But when it comes to the erosion of civil liberties, this is something we have to be very alert and mindful of. That we've seen through the increase and ubiquity of powerful technology that our ability to live privately is already under threat. We have seen the immense power of big tech companies, big pharma companies, in conjunction and collusion with governments, erode civil liberties. This, regardless of how you feel about coronavirus, regardless of how you feel about vaccines, is a piece of legislation that is very, very dangerous. This, for me, is the first thread that could be the weaving of a tapestry that ultimately represents the veil between us and the ability to make informed, autonomous, individual choice. This is beyond left-right politics. This is beyond coronavirus. This is a choice that actually could represent the end of democracy, the end of personal freedom. A test of your faith in democracy for me is always, how do you deal with people who oppose with your views? You know, I can list my political perspectives in so many ways. You know, my views on religion, my views on civil liberties around sexuality and gun laws and abortion and all of these ideas. And in none of those areas would I ever foreclose the rights of other people to have opposing views to me. And I think that's what all of us must have. We must allow people to oppose what we believe in. Stay alert. Wherever you stand on this issue, something very, very significant is happening. And I feel that if we do not oppose it rigorously en masse, we may be entering into a precarious, dangerous new era. Whatever you think about these protests and this legislation, please let me know in the comments. Like the video, it really helps me, and subscribe as well. It helps me to have subscribers. And if you want more information, like where you can see me live or other projects that I'm involved in, go over to russellbrand.com and sign up to my mailing list. On my Luminary podcast, I have an hour-long conversation every week with an expert on subjects like this, so we can dive deeper and learn more. Furthermore, I do meditations on Luminary, so if you subscribe to it, you get the meditation, you get a deep conversation. Also, go over to my side channel, Awakening Now, and you will learn techniques that help you to cope with living in this crazy world. Let me know what you think in the comments. Turn on those notifications if you can stand to. Keep watching. Thank you.